I'm so excited that you are here. This
Thank
is
you.
so great. I don't know how many of you here have read the book. I was absolutely riveted with the page turner. Craig has worked as an environmental reporter for the Seattle Times since 2000. A journalist for 2 decades, his work has appeared in Smithsonian Magazine, The Washington Post, and Newsweek. He has tagged along with tribal fishermen who have hunted seals in Alaska, hitched helicopter rides with scientists in the melting Arctic, and prowled the Oregon woods for endangered owls, and tracked the development of Wyoming's oil fields. What fun.
Sometimes.
Sometimes. The National Society of Environmental Journalists twice named him Outstanding Beat Reporter of the Year, most recently in 2010. He was a 2007 Fellow at the Nyman Foundation for Journalism at Harvard University, and he lives in Seattle with his wife and daughter. Shell's Games is his first book, which won the 2011 Rachel Carlson Environmental Book Award and was a finalist for the Pacific Northwest Bookseller Association and Washington State Book Award. So, you've been busy. Here's Craig.
So thank you all for having me. It's a little difficult coming to a place like this from Seattle because I know you guys get a lot of visitors and nobody ever wants to leave. I apologize I will try not to sort of take this back to everybody and tell them. I had a lovely day. I actually started my journey up here today going to Friday Harbor Labs on San Juan Island and just talking to some folks about the research they're doing with ocean acidification, which is actually pretty important and very cool, and I'll be writing a lot about it soon. So I hope you guys are paying attention. For those of you who know something about it, for those of you who don't, start paying attention. It's important. Thank you, Gene and CDOC and everybody else. I'm really thrilled to be here. It was great to come earlier in the day and actually be able to see the sun out here. I haven't seen it much lately back at home. I don't know if you guys have or not. What I would like to do tonight is talk to you a little bit about, I'm going to read a little bit from the book and talk to you a little bit about the book, but what I'd really like to do is talk to you about the journey I took to sort of discover what ended up becoming this story. My name is Craig Welch. I'm the environment reporter at the Seattle Times, and before working at the Seattle Times, I worked in Spokane and Olympia as a reporter. And I actually started my career in a place not unlike this in Jackson Hole, Wyoming. A small town, very much about people who are interested in the outdoors. And I haven't actually been able to spend my entire career writing about the environment, but no matter what I did, I always seemed to find my way back to writing about nature. And I think it was no surprise to anybody who knows me when I finally got excited and said, I have a book idea, I want to write a book, and it was about nature. What I'd like to talk to you about tonight is our country's natural treasures and the people who are actually finding a way to steal them. I don't know how much folks around here know about even the concept of wildlife trafficking. I'm going to sort of walk you through my own learning curve. It's a fascinating world. And what I'd really like to do is encourage you to interrupt me at any point. And please, can everybody hear me okay? Mm-hmm. Okay, great. This book is about wildlife trafficking, not just in places like Africa or Asia, or where most of us, or at least I, was first thinking about wildlife trafficking, but it's actually about wildlife trafficking in places like Colorado, or Arizona, or New York City, or, of course, Seattle, and in some cases, in places as close as Port Angeles. The book was actually written like a detective novel, and there are lots of twists and turns, and there are good guys and bad guys, and informants, and hitmen, and it's actually all entirely true. I ended up tracking down about 30,000 pages of documents from state and federal agents. And the best description I heard in sort of the book tour that I did immediately after was an NPR reviewer who actually said the book read like a combination of Sam Spade and Wild Kingdom. And that was perfect. That's exactly what I wanted people to come away with. So it was the story is strange and sad and sometimes funny, and putting it together for me was both strange and sad and sometimes funny. I actually, at one point, took a trip not one point, several points, I took a trip to prison and spent time in prison talking to folks involved in wildlife trafficking. I went down to South Carolina and toured a really amazing lab where they do a lot of sort of DNA, CSI kind of work with wildlife. But unlike the lab that some of you may have heard about that the Fish and Wildlife Service has in Oregon that does a lot of sort of investigative techniques, this is all entirely with marine creatures. And so they basically can take a little piece of hair that somebody found and determine which animal it was from and where it came from and whether or not it's likely to have been endangered and whether or not it was likely to have been poached or died of natural causes. They just do amazing work. I met with federal agents in Boston and South Carolina, in San Francisco, and in Los Angeles. And I got a tour of the California-Mexican border with the federal agents who were responsible for making sure wildlife goes back and forth only legally. And I got to get sort of an inside view of the kind of things they see every day. And if you would indulge me, I just want to read you a quick section from this book that I think gives a pretty good taste of exactly what kind of stuff is happening on our international borders right now with wildlife trafficking. Elephant tusks, wild furs, alligator skins, and exotic birds. That's what wildlife thieves used to smuggle. By the close of the 20th century, there was a new reality emerging. Almost anything in nature can become contraband. Fish eggs, baboon noses, decorative seed plants known as cycads, which have been around since the Jurassic period. Every day at U.S. airports and border crossings, wildlife inspectors and customs agents witness inspired displays of duplicity. Bird smugglers are stuffing stolen live finches in curling irons, or squeezing them into socks padded in badminton birdie tubes. Thieves hide tiny golden-throated tropical birds called Cuban grassquits in their underpants, and some cram banded iguanas from Fiji Island into hollowed-out prosthetic legs. Women have smuggled monkeys in their hair. Men have hid primates in their pants. Traffickers ferrying bags of seahorses from Mexico have crossed into the country and immediately mailed their booty overseas. Sometimes they actually mark the shipping boxes books because they can get cheaper rates. This trade seamlessly intertwines with conventional markets. There are boutique fashion outlets from New York to Oregon peddling in illegal blue coral jewelry, with belts made from alligators killed by poachers or watch straps carved from the skin of Argentine lizards. Vials of aphrodisiacs ground from deer and tiger penises and smuggled into the country by airline flight attendants are for sale in herbal markets in almost every major city in the country. From the tuna you find in a favorite sushi joint to gobies you might see in your friend's fish tank, stolen creatures or goods made from them sell regularly in shopping malls, pet stores, flower shops, and restaurants, even in supermarkets and warehouses specializing in home furnishings. The bulk of this trade still comes into the U.S. from abroad, but the thieving is no longer limited to third world countries. Creatures by the tens of thousands are now airlifted from the forests, deserts, and waterways around America, often not far from major cities like New York, San Francisco, Miami, Phoenix, and of course Seattle. Sometimes the criminals prove to be small-time hoods, no different from desperate drug abusers who swipe copper pipes from construction zones. But increasingly, this trade draws a craftier breed of thief, one literate enough to comprehend obscure laws and wily enough to find creative ways around them. And that is what this book is about. The story in this book is there's actually a story, and the story is about a handful of cops here in the Pacific Northwest. They're not traditional police officers, though they do carry guns and handcuffs. These law enforcement folks work for agencies like the National Marine Fisheries Service, or the National Park Service, or the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, and their job is to police the theft of nature. the job takes them to some pretty strange places, like here. These are a couple of investigators from the Washington Department of Fish and Wildlife, and I went out with a photographer with them while they were patrolling for poachers out in the middle of the night. This shot was taken probably about 2 a.m. And their job takes them to some pretty strange places, and it also introduces them to some pretty strange creatures. And this won't come as a shock to you guys, but to other people I have to apologize in advance for showing them this. This is the creature that this book is actually told around. And I know I don't need to tell you what it is, but I'm going to anyway. This is obviously a gooey duck, and I'm just going to interject here for a second. I do apologize for the angle. When this book came out, this was a photograph that a friend of mine took and allowed me to use for the promotion of this book. And somebody actually wanted to put a review of the book on the CBS Evening News homepage. And I woke up in the morning, and it was like the first thing I saw on the homepage. And then the author of the review actually called me and said, "I've been asked to move that away from the thing that people see first thing in the morning." But that is both sort of what attracted me, no pun intended, attracted me to this story and this kind of activity is that there are people outside our region who don't know what this is. And this creature ends up becoming a perfect metaphor for everything you see in the world of wildlife trafficking today. So I'm just going to walk you through a little bit about it. In case you don't know, this is a gooey duck. And there are different species of gooey duck found in places outside the Northwest, but they're not found in significant size or significant quantity anywhere else except between Northern California and basically Southeast Alaska. There is a worldwide market right now for gooey duck meat, but that market is actually fairly new. Native Americans here in the Pacific Northwest have been eating them for thousands of years. Folks who live here have been eating them for a long time. But it wasn't really until the late 60s and early 70s when folks started eating these creatures in Japan and China and Hong Kong and parts of Asia. And that's part of what makes this an amazing metaphor for everything that's happening with wildlife trafficking. But as I said, the gooey duck is actually meant to serve as a stand-in because what's happening here and what's happening with this creature is happening in other cities with other creatures around the U.S. I'm going to actually just walk you through that. I wasn't going to do this yet, but I will. So how many of you have actually know how gooey duck are harvested here? Okay, it's actually very cool. I'm just going to show you this video taken out here in Puget Sound. So I don't know if you can see what he was reaching for, but I'll watch it again. What you will see is basically a little circle and a divot that's shaped like the very tip of a shotgun barrel that had been buried in the sand. It's a little figure 8. And he's going to reach in and grab it and spray with spray hoses to loosen it up. You can barely see it there in the mud. He's wearing scuba gear. Most of the time it's actually done in Puget Sound with hookah gear, so they basically have air that goes up to the boat. All of which becomes incredibly relevant and important in the story about gooey duck in Puget Sound. So there's an entire industry here in Puget Sound you probably know about. I can't remember the figures now. I think it's something like $40 million a year. Gooey duck is harvested here in Puget Sound legally. It's a great fishing industry. There are, just like all the fishing industries in Puget Sound, it's split between tribal and non-tribal. And the folks are out there working the waters in certain sections of Puget Sound pretty much 365 days a year. So what will happen is that whoever dives down will fill up this net with gooey ducks, and the net will come aboard the boat, and they'll actually take the gooey ducks out and look at them and sort of arrange them by quality. So the more white and sort of lightly colored clams that you see are the ones that are going to fetch a high dollar overseas. And just like with red delicious apples, it's not necessarily that the geoduck meat is going to be better. It's shinier, and that's what the market wants. People just like it. They'll get stacked in these milk crates, and then these milk crates will be actually packed with gel packs and sent to the airport. And from the time that that geoduck is actually pulled out of Puget Sound, it very well could be in a tank in a restaurant overseas within 72 hours and served sometime within the next couple of days. So I'm gonna, if you don't mind, I would like to do one more quick read to give you a sense of why all this sort of came together for me here. So, and then I'll sort of talk you through how everything happened.
Is that a dollar amount?
It is, but it's not U.S. dollars. I think that's Hong Kong.
Hong Kong dollar.
Do they taste like any other clams?
You know, not really. They are, at least in my opinion, they're denser and chewier, and it's a much more acquired taste. And it's just, I don't know how to really compare it to really anything else. It has the sort of oceany flavor of clam, but the texture is nothing like it. You can actually, it's a little bit like what you would imagine biting into a bicycle tire. But it's actually very good.